Today we're going to read chapter 7, 8, and 9. Chapter 7. When I sleep, I dream. In my dreams, I can do anything. I get picked first on the playground for games. I can run so fast. I take gymnastics and I never fall off the balance beam. I know how to square dance and I'm good at it. I call my friends on the phone and we talk for hours. I whisper secrets. I sing. When I wake up in the morning, it's always sort of a letdown as reality hits me. I have to be fed and dressed so I can spend another long day in a happy face room at Spalding Street School. Along with the assortment of teachers we've had in room H5, there have been more classroom aides than I can count. These aides, usually one guy to help with the boys and one lady to help with the girls, do stuff like take us to the bathroom or change diapers on kids like Ashley and Carl, feed us at lunch, wheel us where we need to go, wipe mouths, and give hugs. I don't think they get paid very much because they never stay very long, but they should get $1 million. What they do is really hard, and I don't think most folks get that. It's even hard to keep good teachers for us. I guess I don't blame them for leaving because, like I said, we're a tough bunch to handle sometimes. But once in a while, we get a good one. After Squeaky Mrs. Hyatt for kindergarten and Game Show Mr. Gross for first grade, Mrs. Tracy breezed into our room for second grade. She figured out I like books, so she got some earphones and hooked me up with audiobooks on CD. She started with baby stuff like Dr. Seuss, which my father and I read when I was 2. So after I tossed those on the floor a couple of times instead of punishing me, she figured out I needed something better. I listened to all the Babysitters Club books and those goofy Goosebumps books. She asked me questions after each book, and I got every single question right. Things like, which of these helped to solve the mystery? Then she'd show me a pebble, a starfish, and an ink pen. The pebble, of course. She'd cheer after we'd gone through the questions and then hook me up on another book. That year, I listened to all the books by Beverly Cleary and all the books about those boxcar kids. It was awesome. The next year, it all unraveled. I know teachers are supposed to write notes to the next teacher in line so they know what to expect, but either Mrs. Tracy didn't do it or Mrs. Billups, our third grade teacher, didn't read them. Mrs. Billups started every morning by playing her favorite CD. I hated it. Old MacDonald Had a Farm, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, The Itsy Bitsy Spider, all sung by children who could not sing. The type of music grown-ups think is all the kinds of cute, but it's awful. Mrs. Billups put it on at full volume every single morning, over and over and over. No wonder we were always in a bad mood. Once she had the Tin Pan Band on. Mrs. Billups went over the alphabet every single day with third graders. Now, children, this is an A. How many of you can say A? Good. She'd smile and say, good, even if nobody in the class responded. I wondered if she would teach able-bodied third graders the same way. Probably not. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Now let's move on to B. This is the letter B. Let's all say B. Good. Again, to silence. She didn't seem to care. I glanced with longing at the books on tape and the earphones, which had been shoved into a corner. One day, I guess I'd had enough. Mrs. Billups had expanded from saying the letters to making the sound of each one. Buh, she said loudly, spitting a little, and she said, buh is the sound of the letter B. Let's all say buh together, children. Then Maria, who was always in a good mood, started throwing crayons. Willie began to babble, and I bellowed. I may not be able to make clear sounds, but I can make a lot of noise. I screamed because I hated that stuff. It was just plain stupid. I screeched because I couldn't talk and tell her to shut up. And that made me cry because I'd never be able to tell anybody what I was really thinking. So I screamed and yelled and shrieked. I cried like a 2-year-old. I would not stop. Then my tornado explosion took over. I flailed and jerked and basically spazzed out. I kicked so hard my shoes popped out of the foot straps on my chair. That made me tilt to one side, and I screamed even louder. Mrs. Billups didn't know what to do. She tried to calm me down, but I didn't want to be calmed. Even the aides couldn't stop me. Jill and Maria started to cry. Even Ashley, dressed all in yellow that day, looked upset. Freddie spun his chair around in circles, glancing sideways at me fearfully. Carl hollered for lunch. Then he pooped in his pants again. The whole class is out of control, and I kept screeching. The teacher called Mrs. Anthony, the principal, whose eyes got wide as she opened our door. She took one look at the situation and said tersely, "Call her mother." She could not have left more quickly. A moment later, the teacher had my mother on the phone. "Mrs. Brooks, this is Melody's teacher, Anastasia Billups. Can you come to the school right away?" I knew my mother had to be worried. Was I sick, bleeding, dead? No, she's not ill. She's fine, we think, Mrs. Billups was saying in her most professional sounding teacher voice. We just can't get her to stop screaming. She's got the whole class in an uproar. I could picture my mother on the other end of the line trying to figure out what was going on. Luckily, it was her day off. I knew she'd be there in a few minutes, so I gradually calmed down and finally shut up. The other kids quieted down as well, like somebody had clicked off the switch. Old MacDonald continued to play. My mother arrived faster than I thought possible. When I saw her jeans and dirty sweatshirt, I realized she'd dropped everything and jumped in the car. She ran over to me and asked what was wrong. I took a few deep, shuddering breaths, then I pointed to the alphabet on my talking board and screeched some sounds of frustration. "This is about the alphabet?" my mother asked. "Yes," I pointed, then pounded on the answer. She turned to Mrs. Billups. "What were you working on before all the screaming started?" Mrs. Billups replied in that superior tone that teachers dressed in nice red business suits when they were talking to mothers with dirty shirts on. "We were reviewing all the alphabet, of course. The sound of the letter B, if I recall. I always start with the basics. These children need constant review because they don't retain information like the rest of us." My mother was getting the picture. "So you're going over the ABCs, correct? It's February." I beg your pardon? "School started in August. You haven't gotten past the letter B in 6 months." Mom was bawling and unballing her fists. I've never seen my mother hit anything, but when I see her do that, I always wonder if she might. "Who are you to tell me how to run my class?" the teacher asked angrily. "And who are you to bore these students with mindless activities?" My mother snapped back. "How dare you?" the teacher gasped. "I dare anything for my daughter," Mom replied, her voice dangerous. "And for the rest of these children." "You don't understand," the teacher began. Mom interrupted her. "No, Mrs. Billups, it is you who does not understand." Mom looked like she was trying to calm herself down, because then she said, "Look, have you ever said to yourself, if they show that stupid commercial on TV one more time, I think I'll just scream?" Mrs. Billups nodded slowly. "Or if I have to sit 5 more minutes in this traffic jam, I'll simply explode." "Yeah, I suppose," she admitted. "Well, I think it's what happens to Melody," she said to herself. "If I have to go over those letters one more time, I'll just scream." So she did. I really don't blame her. Do you? Mrs. Billups looked from my mother to me. "I guess not, now that you explain it that way," Mrs. Billups finally said, her voice now as calm as my mother's. "Melody knows her alphabet, all the sounds of all the letters, and hundreds of words on sight. She can add and subtract numbers in her head. We discussed all of this at our last parent conference, didn't we?" I could tell my mother was trying to control her temper. "I thought you were exaggerating," the teacher said. "Parents are not always realistic when it comes to these children." "If you call them these children one more time, I might scream," my mother warned. "But Melody does have mental and physical limitations," Mrs. Billup argued, trying to put Mom in her place. "I guess you have to learn to accept that." And the fire was back. "Melody can't walk. Melody can't talk, but she's extremely intelligent. And you better learn to accept that," Mom spat out. The teacher backed up an inch or two. "Didn't you read her record from last year?" Mom demanded. "Melody loves listening to books on tape." I try to approach each child with an open mind and not be influenced by other teachers. "All the records are in a box someplace." "Maybe you should find that box," my mother said, her lips tight. "Well, I never," Mrs. Billups countered. "Maybe that's your problem," Mom replied with a grin. Then she tilted her head and turned toward the CD player. "Oh, one more thing. May I see that wonderful CD you're playing?" "Of course," Mrs. Billups said, smiling a little. "The children love this, do they?" Mom asked. The teacher lifted the disc from the player. Twinkle, twinkle, silence. Willie laughed. Willie sighed out loud. Mom took the CD, dug down in her purse for a moment, gave Mrs. Billups a $5 bill, and deftly snapped the disc in half. That music was cruel and unusual punishment. Freddie and Maria cheered. Gloria whispered, "Thank you." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for Mrs. Billups. She looked so confused. She just didn't get it. Mom walked over to the sink in our room, turned on the warm water, and soaked a stack of paper towels under the faucet. She came back to me and gently wiped my face with a warm, soggy wad. Nothing had ever felt so soothing. She then brushed my hair, adjusted the straps and buckles on my chair, gave me a quick hug, and went home. Mrs. Billups quit her job after spring break, so we ended up with a series of subs to the end of the year. I think she had figured it would be easy to work with people who were dumber than she was. She was wrong. Chapter 8. For a long time, it was just me, my mom, and dad. And my goldfish, Oli. I was 5 years old when I got him, and I had him for almost 2 years before he died. I guess that's old for a goldfish. Nobody knew Oli's name but me. But that's okay. Oli had been a prize from a carnival Dad had taken me to, and I think Oli's life was worse than mine. He lived in a small bowl on the table in my room. The bottom of the bowl was covered with tiny pink rocks, and a fake plastic log sat wedged in the rocks. I guess it was supposed to look like something from under the sea, but I don't think there were any lakes or oceans that really have rocks that color. Oli spent all day swimming around that small bowl, ducking through the fake log, and then swimming around again. He always swam in the same direction. The only time he changed his course is when Mom dropped a few grains of fish food into his bowl each morning and evening. I'd watch him gobble the food, then poop it out, then swim around and around once again. I felt sorry for him. At least I got to go outside into the store, into school. Oli just swam in a circle all day. I wondered if the fish ever slept. But anytime I woke up in the middle of the night, Oli was still swimming, his little mouth opening and closing like he was trying to say something. One day, when I was about 7, Oli jumped out of his bowl, and I had been listening to music on the radio. Mom had finally figured out I like country western station, and I was in a good mood. The music was sounding orangey and yellowish as I listened, and the faint whiff of lemon seemed to surround me. I felt real mellow as I watched Oli do his thing round and round his bowl. But suddenly, for no reason, I could figure Oli dove down to the bottom of his bowl, rushed to the top, and hurled himself right out of that bowl. He landed on the table. He gasped and flopped, and I'm sure he was surprised he couldn't breathe. His eyes bulged, and the gills on the side pulsed with effort. I didn't know what to do. He'd die without water really fast, so I screamed. Mom was downstairs or maybe outside getting the mail, but she didn't come right away. I screamed again, louder. I cried out. I yelled. I screeched. Oli continued to flop and gasp, looking more desperate. Oli needed water. I howled once more, but Mom didn't come running. Where could she be? I knew I had to do something, so I reached over the table and stretched out my arm. I could just barely touch Oli's bowl. I figured if I could get the fish wet at least a little bit, I might be able to save him. I hooked my fingers on the edge of the fish bowl and I pulled. Water splashed everywhere, all over the table, the carpet, me, and Oli. He seemed to flop a little less for a second or two, and I kept wailing. Finally, I heard my mother thundering up the stairs. When she came through the door, she took one look at the mess and the dying goldfish and shouted, Melody, what have you done? Why did you knock over the fish bowl? Didn't you know a fish can't live without water? Of course I knew that. I'm not stupid. Why did she think I'd been screeching and calling for her? She scurried over to the mess, scooped up Oli, and gently placed him back in the bowl. Then she ran to the bathroom and I heard her running water, but I knew it was too late. Either because of the time out of the bowl or because the bathroom water wasn't the right temperature, Oli didn't survive. Mom came back in and scolded me once more. Your goldfish didn't make it, Melody. I don't get it. Why would you do that to the poor little fish? He was happy in his little world. I wondered if maybe Oli wasn't so happy after all. Maybe he was sick and tired of that bowl and that log and that circle. Maybe he just couldn't take it anymore. I feel like that sometimes. There was no way I could explain to Mom what had just happened. I really had tried to save Oli's life. I just looked away from Mom. She was angry and I was too. If she hadn't been so slow, Oli might have made it. I didn't want her to see me cry. She cleaned up the mess with a sigh and left me with my music and an empty spot on my table. The colors had vanished. It was a long time before I was ready for another pet, but on my 8th birthday, my father brought a big box into the house. He seemed to have trouble holding on to it. When he set it on the floor in front of me, out exploded a flash of wriggling gold fun. A puppy. A golden retriever puppy. I shrieked and kicked with joy. A puppy. The clumsy little dog raced around the room, sniffing in every corner. I watched her every move, loving her right away. After exploring every table leg and piece of furniture, the puppy stopped, made sure all of us were watching, then squatted and peed right there on the carpet. Mom yelled, but only a little. That's when the dog knew she was in charge. She checked out Dad's bare toes, but she stayed away from Mom, who was trying to soak the spot out of the rug with paper towels and that spray stuff she uses in the kitchen. Finally, the puppy circled my wheelchair around and around like she was trying to figure it out. She sniffed it, sniffed my legs and feet, looked at me for a minute, then jumped right up into my lap like she'd done it a million times. I barely breathed, not wanting to disturb her. Then wow, wow, wow. She turned around 3 times and made herself comfortable. I think she made a noise like a sigh of satisfaction. I know I did. I stroked her soft back and head as gently as I could. I was the one who named her. Mom and I Mom and Dad kept suggesting dumb names like Fuzz and Coffee, but I knew as soon as I saw her, what her name should be. I pointed to the bowl on the table, which held my most favorite candies, butterscotch caramel. They're soft enough to melt in my mouth, so I don't have to chew. And oh, were they delicious. You want to call her Candy? Dad asked. I shook my head no, gently, so the sleeping puppy wouldn't wake up. Caramel? Mom asked. I shook my head once more. Why don't we call her Stinky? Dad suggested with a grin. Mom and I just glared at him. I continued to point to the candy dish. Finally, Mom said, I know, you want to call her Butterscotch. I wanted to shriek, but I forced myself to stay calm. I tried real hard not to do anything that would knock the puppy off my lap. Ugh, I said softly as I continued to stroke the dog's silky fur. I didn't know that anything could be so soft, and she was all mine. It was the best birthday I ever had. Butterscotch sleeps at the foot of my bed every night. It's like she read the book on what a great dog ought to do. Bark only when a stranger is at the door, never pee or poop in the house. She got over that puppy stuff, and keep Melody happy. Butterscotch doesn't care that I can't talk to her. She knows I love her. She just gets it. One day, a few months after I got her, I fell out of my wheelchair. It happens. Mom had given me lunch, taken me to the toilet, and wheeled me back to my room. Butterscotch trotted behind, never in a way, just close by me all the time. Mom popped in a DVD for me and made sure my hands were properly positioned so I could rewind and fast forward the film. She didn't notice my seatbelt wasn't fastened, and neither did I. She traveled up and down the stairs doing several loads of laundry. I'm awfully messy, and I guess she had started fixing dinner. The rich aroma of simmering tomato sauce floated up the stairs. Mom knows I love spaghetti. She peeked her head in to check on me and said, I'm going to lie down for a couple minutes, Melody. Are you okay for a few? I nodded and pointed my arm toward the door to tell her to go ahead. My movie was getting good anyway. Butterscotch sat curled next to my chair. She'd outgrown my lap, so Mom blew me a kiss and closed the door. I was watching something I'd seen a million times, The Wizard of Oz. I think most people in the world can quote sections of that movie, no extra brains required, because it's one of the movies that gets played over and over on cable channels. But I know every single word in it. I know what Dorothy will say before she even opens her mouth. I don't even think we're in Kansas anymore, Toto. It makes me smile. I've never been to Kansas or Oz or anywhere more than a few miles away from home. Even though I knew it was coming when the movie got to the part where the Tin Man does that stiff little dance to the music of If I Only Had a Heart. I cracked up. I laughed so hard I jerked forward in my chair and found myself face down on the floor. Butterscotch jumped up immediately, sniffing me and making sure I wasn't hurt. I was fine, but I couldn't get back up in my chair. Worse, I was going to miss the part where the Cowardly Lion gets smacked on the nose by Dorothy. I wondered how long Mom's nap would last. I didn't scream like that time Oli had jumped out of the bowl. I wasn't upset, just a little uncomfortable. I tried to flip over, but I couldn't from the position I had landed in. If I could have seen the television from where I had fallen, I might have been okay on the floor for a little while. Butterscotch makes a great pillow. But Butterscotch went to the closed door and scratched. I could hear her claws ripping at the wood. Dad wouldn't be happy when he saw that, but Mom didn't come. So Butterscotch barked. First a couple of tentative yips, then louder and more urgent. Finally, she jumped up and threw her whole body against the door, making loud thuds. She'd bark, then thud. Mom couldn't ignore all that racket. I'm sure it was only for a few minutes, but it seemed like longer. Mom came to the door, looking groggy. Her hair was all messed up. What's going on in here? She began. Then she saw me. Oh, Melody, baby, are you okay? She ran to me, sat on the floor, and lifted me onto her lap. She checked everything, my arms and legs, my back, my face, my scalp, my tongue. I wanted to tell her I was fine, but she needed to do was put me back in my chair, but she had to do the mom thing and double check. Butterscotch, you're a good girl, she said as she petted the dog and hugged me tight. Doubles on the dog food tonight. I'm sure Butterscotch would have preferred a nice thick bone instead, but she can't talk either, so both my dog and I get what they give us. Mom carefully put me back on my chair and made sure my seatbelt was latched correctly. Butterscotch curled up right in front of me, making sure, I guess, that if I slid out again, she'd be there to soften the fall. That dog is amazing. Mom restarted the video from the beginning, but somehow that yellow brick road had lost some of its magic glow. Nobody really get wishes granted by the great Oz. As I watched, I wondered if I were blown to Oz with my dog, what would we ask the wizard for? Brains? I've got plenty. Courage? Butterscotch is scared of nothing. A heart? We've got lots of heart. Me and my pup. So what could I ask for? I'd like to sing like Cowardly Lion and dance like the Tin Man. Neither one of them did those things very well, but that would be good enough for me. On to chapter 9. When I was 8, things changed. I think I knew Mom was going to have a baby even before she did. She smelled different, like new soap. Her skin felt softer and warmer. She picked me up out of bed one morning, then almost let me fall back on the mattress. Whew, she said. You're getting awfully heavy, Melody. I'm going to have to start lifting weights. Her forehead had broken out in a sweat. I don't think I'd gain any weight. It was Mom who was different. She sat down on the chair next to my bed for a few minutes, then suddenly ran out of the room. I heard her throwing up in the bathroom. She came back a few minutes later looking pale. Her breath smelled like mouthwash. I must have eaten something funky, she mumbled as she got me dressed, but I think she knew even then. I bet she was scared. When Mom finally figured out, she sat down with me to break the news. Melody, I have something wonderful to tell you. I did my best to look curious. You're going to have a baby brother or sister real soon. I grinned and did my best imitation of surprise and excitement. I reached out and hugged her. Then I patted her stomach and pointed to myself. She knew what I meant. She looked right she looked me right in the eye. We're going to pray that this little one is fat and fine and healthy, she told me. You know, we love you, Melody, just as you are, but we're hoping this child doesn't have to face the challenges you do. Me too. From then on, she put Dad in charge of lifting me, and although she never talked about it again in front of me, I knew she was worried. She gobbled gigantic green vitamin pills, ate lots of fresh oranges and apples, and she had this habit of touching her bulging belly and mumbling a prayer. I could tell that Dad was scared too, but his worry showed up in funny little ways, like bringing Mom piles of purple irises, her favorite flower, or fixing her gallons of grape Kool-Aid or big plates of grapes. I don't know what made Mom crave purple stuff. Instead of watching hours and hours of the Discovery Channel, I found myself in my room staring at an empty TV screen, just thinking in the silence. I knew that a new baby was really time consuming, and I also knew I took up a lot of time. How would my parents ever have time for both of us? Then a really horrible thought popped into my brain. What if they decided to look into Dr. Hughley's suggestions? I couldn't make that thought go away. One Saturday afternoon, a few months before the baby was born, I was curled up on our sofa dozing. Mom had put pillows around me to make sure I didn't fall off. Butterscotch slept nearby, and Dad's favorite jazz station played on a saxophone snoozer. Mom and Dad sat together on the smaller sofa, talking together quietly. I'm sure they thought I was asleep. What if, Mom said, her voice tight. It won't be. The chances are so small, honey, Dad replied, but he sounded unsure. I couldn't bear it, Mom told him. You'd find the strength, he said calmly, but it's not going to happen. The odds are. But what if? She insisted, interrupting him, and for only the second time I could remember, my mother started to cry. Everything's going to be fine, my father said, trying to soothe her. We've got to think positive thoughts. It's all because of me, my mother said softly. I perked up and listened harder. What do you mean? Dad asked. It's my fault that Melody's like this. Mom was crying really hard then. I could barely make out her words. Diane, that's crazy. You can't hold onto that kind of guilt. These things just happen. I could tell Dad was trying to be reasonable. No, I'm the mother, she wailed. It was my job to bring the child into the world safely, and I screwed it up. Every other woman on the planet is able to give birth to a normal baby. There must be something wrong with me. Sweetheart, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. And I could hear him pull my mom to him. But Chuck, I'm so scared this baby is going to be messed up too, she said in a shuddering breath. Please don't go there. Don't even think like that, Dad murmured. Statistically, what are the chances? Two children who. And I suddenly couldn't hear him anymore because my head was pulsing with the things I wanted to say but couldn't. I wanted to tell Mom that I was sorry. She was so sad and so scared, that it wasn't her fault, that I was just the way I was and she had nothing to do with it. The part that hurt the most is I couldn't tell her any of it. During Mom's entire pregnancy, however, my parents' attention to me never wavered, even though, yeah, I worried that it would. Dad did lots more as Mom got closer to her due date. He did some of the laundry, most of the cooking, and all the lifting and carrying. I got to school on time every day, got my stories read to me every night, and the three of us waited and hoped and prayed. But Penny was born perfect and copper bright, just like her name. From the minute she came home from the hospital, she was a really happy baby. Mom truly did carry a little bundle of joy into the house, but I guess a new baby is rough on any parents, especially if they already have a kid like me at home. Sometimes there would be arguments. I could hear them through the bedroom wall. I need more help around here, Chuck, Mom would say, trying to keep her voice low. Well, you pay more attention to the baby than you do to me. If you'd help me more, I'd have more time for you. With two kids and one of them Melody, it's not easy. I have to go to work, you know? I have a job too. Don't throw that in my face. Plus, I'm up twice a night to nurse the baby. I know, I know. I'm sorry, Diane. Dad always softened and let Mom win. It's just I'm so tired all the time, Mom would say, her voice muffled. I'm sorry. I'll do better. I promise. I'll take off work tomorrow and take care of both girls. Why don't you catch a movie or take Mrs. Valencia out to lunch? It would get quiet once more, but even so, somehow I always ended up feeling a tiny bit guilty. Life sure would be easier if they had only one child, one with working parts. I once got one of those electronic dolls for Christmas. It was supposed to talk and cry and move its arms and legs if you push the right buttons. But then we opened the box, one of the arms had come off, and all the doll did, no matter which button you push, was squeak. Mom took it back to the store and got her money back. I wonder if she ever wished she could get a refund from me. But Penny really was a perfect baby. After just a few months, she was sleeping through the night and smiling through each day. She sat up exactly when infants are supposed to, rolled over on schedule, and crawled on cue. Amazing, and it seemed so easy. Sure, she fell on her face a few times, but once she got it, she was off. Penny zoomed around like a little wind-up toy. She learned that the toilet was fun to splash in and that lamps will fall on you if you grab the cord. She learned that golden retrievers are not ponies. Peas taste funny. Dead flies on the floor are no, but candy is really good. She laughed all the time. She learned her sister Melody couldn't do what she could do, but she didn't seem to care, so I tried not to care either. Dad had his own camcorder, followed Penny around like the paparazzi following a rock star. We have hundreds of hours of footage of Penny being cute and doing adorable things. And well, I admit it, sometimes I got kind of sick of watching a new video every time she learned something new. It sort of sucks to watch a baby do what you wish you could do. Penny holding her own bottle, Penny feeding herself teeny tiny Cheerios from her high chair tray, Penny saying ma, ma, and da, da, just like the babies on Sesame Street, Penny crawling on the floor and chasing butterscotch, Penny clapping her hands. How did her little brain know how to tell her to pull herself up to a standing position, to hold onto the sofa for balance? How did she know how to stand up on her own? Sometimes she'd fall over, but then she'd pop right back up. Never did she lie there, stuck like a turtle on its shell. Dad still did our nighttime reading, but now it was Penny who snuggled on his lap. I was too big and too hard to balance, so I sat on my wheelchair, my dog at my feet, as the two of them read the stories I knew by heart. Butterscotch still slept only in my room. I like that. It really did make me glad to know Penny was learning the same books I loved so much. I wondered if she was memorizing them. Probably not. She didn't need to. I think Penny's third word was Dee. She couldn't quite say melody, but she got the last part. I loved it when Mom put Penny in bed with me after her morning bath. She'd grab me and plant wet baby powder smelling kisses all over my face. Dee, she'd say again and again. By the time she was 1 year old, Penny could walk. She wobbled all over the house on her fat little legs. She fell a lot, dropping down on her butt and laughing every time she did. Then she'd get back up, try again. That was something I'd never get to try. With two kids in the house, our family routines changed. It took twice as long to get everybody ready each morning. Mom made sure Penny was dressed in pretty little outfits every day, even though she was just going next door to Miss V's house. My clothes were okay, but I was noticing that lately they were more useful than cute. Mom seemed to be choosing them by how easy they'd be to get on me. It was kind of a bummer, but I knew I was getting heavier and heavier to lift, so changing me was harder. I probably should mention that feeding me is a real process. I can't chew very well, so I mostly get soft foods like scrambled eggs or oatmeal or applesauce. Since I can't hold a fork or spoon, I try, but I keep dropping them. Someone has to place the food into my mouth, one spoonful at a time. It's slow. Spoon, slurp, swallow. Spoon, slurp, swallow. Lots of food falls on the floor. Butterscotch likes that. She's like a canine vacuum cleaner. Drinking stuff is hard for me too. I can't hold a glass and I can't sip from a straw. So somebody has to very carefully hold a cup to my lips and tip a little bit of liquid into my mouth so I can swallow. Too much and I choke and cough and we have to start all over. It takes a long time to get a meal in me. I hate the whole process, obviously. And some mornings were really stressful. Chuck, can you bring me Melody's pink t-shirt from the clean clothes basket? She spilled juice all over her shirt. Mom yelled up the stairs. Didn't you put a bib on her, Diane? Dad yelled back. You know, she makes a mess. Why don't you wait and dress after she eats? So you want me to feed her naked? Just bring the shirt, Mom snapped, and a diaper for Penny. She's got a stinker. She's 2. Isn't she old enough to be potty trained? Dad asked, coming downstairs with a blue t-shirt I had outgrown in one hand and a diaper in the other. Right. I'll get to potty training tonight on the 25th hour of my day. Dad picked Penny up. Uh-oh, that's a bad one, he said, his nose scrunched up. Did you give her sweet potatoes again last night? I thought we stopped giving her those because they always give her the runs. Well, if you had gone to the grocery store like I asked, I could have given her something different. And that shirt is blue, not pink, and too small for Melody. Mom stormed out of the kitchen and up the stairs. Sorry, girls, Dad said to us. He whistled softly while he cleaned Penny up, threatening to call the hazmat team. That was funny. Then he finished feeding me breakfast, not caring that my oatmeal was getting all over the juice-stained shirt. Why not? May as well make a real mess and make it all worth the stress, he said with a laugh. I smiled at him and smeared oatmeal on my tray. Mom came back down with fresh makeup and a freshly painted smile, her hair done and with my pink t-shirt. She and Dad hugged in the kitchen, both took a deep breath, and we actually made it out of the house on time. We had lots of days like that. I'm going to stop here.